Welcome to Plus Arts Media News, a weekly show every Monday at 5 on how art and culture move. If you've got an event, cultural, artistic, or community that you would like us to cover, please shoot me an email at plusartsmedia@gmail.com. And don't forget to come and like, subscribe, ring the bell to keep updated and notifications around all of our doings. Now let's get to the show. The Broadway stage production of Purlie Victorious is coming to PBS in May. Purlie Victorious, a show written by Ossie Davis, which actually made it to Broadway in 1961, is the story of Reverend Purlie Victorious Jackson, a traveling preacher, returning to his hometown in rural Georgia to save his hometown church. Set in the historical era of Jim Crow America, the play starred Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee in the title roles when it made it to Broadway, and is also a good look at the impact of what structural racism does to communities and how we survive through it. This production is going to PBS, is starring Leslie Odom Jr. and directed by the always poignant Kenny Leon, which saw its last performance on Broadway on February 4th. So the only way to see it now is on PBS. Don't forget, Friday, May 24th, check your local listings. Moving on to the streaming apps. Traitors is now streaming on Peacock. Hosted by Alan Cummings, he brings a group of villains together, a cast of people interested in playing Among Us in person. If you don't know the game Among Us, it's also highly addictive. But if you haven't tuned in yet to Traitors, there are 2 seasons, which makes it totally bingeable. And I'm particularly enjoying season 2 because of a villain that I have come to love, known as Phaedra Parks. Now, when Phaedra was on Real Housewives of Atlanta or Married to Medicine, I was never a really good fan. But yes, that Phaedra Parks. It is actually refreshing to have her on a show where I can root for her to be horrible to others, and it's okay. If you don't have heart for such controversial people like our friend Phaedra, or maybe Omarosa, or Wilhelmina Slater, who was expertly portrayed by Vanessa Williams, who is actually not a villain, but fictional characters matter here, and I'm not going to forget about Madam. But take a look at Peacock and the streaming service, and make sure you catch up on episodes for a lovely weekend of streaming. On other streaming apps, Netflix's Avatar's The Last Airbender live action season 1 is definitely a must-see. Now, I know that they've gone into shaky waters with a lot of the live action remakes lately, but One Piece definitely showed us that they were starting to be serious about their business, and I think they can continue that trend in Avatar The Last Airbender. I will say that it definitely diverts from the original material, but the diversions I don't mind because they're keeping all the same emotional beats. And actually the cast, which has taken a lot of flack lately, especially those who are criticizing Azula, who I thought was wonderful, but actually all the cast are wonderful, and I hope they have their armor on and shoulder through, because this live action remake is worth it, and I'm waiting on more seasons, so don't forget to check that out on Netflix. Moving on into these YouTube streets, I wanted to bring up Wine and Chill's review of the Bob Marley movie One Love, which was particularly incisive. Wine and Chill actually brings us context around what actually the historical period was and what actually got covered in the film, and does a really great analysis about what happens in Hollywood when they're actually just trying to tell historical narratives, but bring in the Hollywood machine around plot arc, and also, let's just go ahead and talk it. Patriarchy, yeah. But Wine and Chill breaks it all down and gives it to you real. So make sure you check out that review before you see the movie. Normani, yes, that Normani of Fifth Element, has an album that will be coming out in 2024. And I have to say, as everybody has been excitedly waiting for this, that makes 2024 for me a year that I think is going to be more memorable than I could ever think. Because we're excited to see all that Normani is finally able to give us. Now onto social media drama. Speaking of these YouTube and social media streets. So, I got to start out with the rap beef between the hotties and the barbs. And yes, the barbs went too far. But you should know that it's okay to support and to be inspired by art, but no fandom is actually going to pay your bail fund. So, be reflective about it. And then that followed up with a nice little easy Lotto versus Ice Spice, which gave us 2 songs, Sunday Service and You Think You're the Shit, or is the song named Fart? But anyway, those were great examples of cultural expressions which ignited the community and brought us all out for a good time, actually. And speaking of on-site beef, have you noticed if you're on TikTok that when you when you search for waiting for Yolanda to get out, that you are privy to one of the most special threads on TikTok? I'm telling you, this thread has given me life over this past week. Expect that type of energy to increase as we approach 2025. That's when the woman who ended the singer Selena's life in the 90s, Yolanda, is due to be released from prison, complete with documentary and offers to tell her story. I would skip anything Yolanda has to say about unaliving the greatest Tejano singer of our generation, but Google waiting for Yolanda to get out on TikTok. Chef's kiss. I also have to give proper note to the Beehive, who continues to show us their strength with their campaign off of Beyonce's new upcoming album, which is dropping March 29th. But her 2 singles, 16 Carriages and Texas Hold'em, are now getting radio play on radio stations, including Mid-America. Expect to see her dominating the country charts until summer, and hopefully in this election year until December, because God, we need it. We need to reclaim our music. Thank you, Beyonce. Also on TikTok mention, the Reesateesa situation, also known as Who TF Did I Marry? I have to say, Reesateesa girl, you were doing some channeling work, because this wonderful being got on TikTok and began to tell her truth about what it was to divorce her husband. And again, divorces happen. Things happen all along, but it's extra hard to talk about ending a relationship, a romantic relationship, let me be specific, with a Gemini, because that is not the easiest thing in the world. Girl, I was inspired. I've had a romantic relationship with a Gemini, and even when my friends ask me about it, I can't even open my mouth to describe exactly what kind of Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass world I had been in for the length of that relationship. And she got it done in 50 parts. Good God, that was brief. Although she did mention that she could have gone on longer, and I believe her. But shout out to Reesateesa on TikTok. Please go ahead and subscribe. It is 50 chapters, but they're about 10 minutes each, and every one of them is worth it. Moving on to America's most problematic Gemini, the case down in Georgia, with Trump, who was trying to steal the Georgia election with 11,870 votes, I think it was. Anyway, over the last week, there's been a side hearing where the Trump lawyers have been trying to corner Fani Willis into, I'm not actually sure, because none of it has to do with the fact that he called and left a voicemail asking for 11,870 votes. I will say that a recap of the situation that has kept me laughing in my guts I got from the Secretary of Shade, who is also known as DGG, but Secretary of Shade up there in the DMV area keeps their ear to the street of Capitol Hill, and also different places that are dealing with Capitol Hill, such as Trump calling Georgia, asking for 11,800 votes. So check out the recap of the Fani Willis hearing by Secretary of Shade, DDG. Also, shout out to the fandom of the week, the Mellometers. Now, the Mellometers are a fandom that comes out of Love and Marriage Huntsville, Alabama, who is centered around a star character, Melody Cherie Rogers, who is a businesswoman, a mother, a community provider, and also an entrepreneur. Actually, an entrepreneur for her and her kids, doing it all. Now, Melody Cherie Rogers has had people on the show of Love and Marriage Huntsville, including its producer, Carlos King, seem to make some shady moves in the background. And it was a wonderful thing when we were watching this happen to Melody to see the millimeters rise up and show up and actually tell Carlos King to stop playing in their faces. I'm here for it. I am here for it. Extra shout out to Black Titanic. I don't even know why people are trying to attack the elders in our community. Support the elders. Go ahead, Black Titanic. Anyway, I'm going to close with my art recommendation for the month of February. And as we come to the close of February, I really think it's important that everybody needs to crack open the book, The Fire Next Time, which is actually a collection of essays made by James Baldwin. Now, many people have loved these essays. Originally, they were printed in the 1960s, early 1960s, I think 1963. However, these lessons still ring true today. And honestly, there are only 2 essays in there. And I think who said it best was Eddie Glade Jr. when he was being interviewed for the book club at NMCC, which is actually using The Fire Next Time as their book for this month or this week. He states, Baldwin forces us to encounter our own anger and how Baldwin learned not to let that anger and hatred eat you up inside. So let's leave Black History Month with the knowledge that we do not have to be eaten up inside. And get your copy. Grab it off the shelf. Go to a used bookstore. Let's support local businesses. Thank you. And that's it for today's show. Please join us again next week, Monday at 5. And don't forget to check out our website, AfroFutureCoven.com. See you next week.
You said I got the problem, you ain't to it, yo.